I'm reading these scriptures from the Gospel of John in chapter 15, commencing at the first verse. Jesus is speaking and says, "I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit he prunes, so that it will be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. Remain in me, and I will remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. If someone remains in me and I in them, they will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If anyone does not remain in me, they are like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be given you. This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now remain in my love. If you obey my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have obeyed my Father's commands and remain in his love. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, that they lay down their life for their friends. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends, for everything that I learned from my Father I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you to go and bear fruit that will last. Then the Father will give you whatever you ask in my name. This is my command: love each other." And we pray God will encourage us from this portion of his word. This is my second to last Sunday in which I speak here in the sanctuary. For next Sunday I will be in the contemporary service, and then the Sunday after that will be my final Sunday. As I have so little time left, you will forgive me if I repeat something that for me is very important. And so some of what I say, some of you will have heard before, but I do so because to me it's something I urgently want you to hear and to remember. I don't know if you're like me, but I find I get very frustrated with people who keep repeating themselves. I get very frustrated with people who keep repeating themselves. One time, some time ago now, I was visiting my daughters, and they were down under. And I had picked up a rental car at the airport, driven to their place, and the next morning I told them I was going to visit some friends. And because down there they drive on the other side of the highway, my younger daughter said, "Dad, let me tell you something. Remember when you're turning to give way to oncoming traffic." I said, "Thank you." I was a little annoyed. I mean, I taught her how to drive. A little later, and she said, now, just before you go, I want to remind you, remember, turning, you give way always to oncoming traffic. I said, I know, you told me. I walked to the car. I remember she walked with me. I thought, why is she walking with me? She wanted to tell me to make sure I gave way to oncoming traffic. I was getting very frustrated. And then I got in the car and she tapped on the window. Put the window down. She said, just remember, Dad, give way to oncoming traffic. I drove off, and as I was driving, I thought, why did she keep repeating that? Then it dawned on me. I didn't realize until then. She kept repeating that because she loved me. She cared about me. She didn't want anything to happen to me that would hurt me. In John chapter 15, Jesus does the same thing. He just keeps repeating himself. In verse 4, he says, "Remain in me." And just in case you didn't hear that, he also says in verse 4 the same thing. He says, "You cannot bear fruit unless you remain in me." Twice in the one verse. Now, this word remain, in the older version, it's abide. I've tried to simplify that for myself and a more simplistic version, and it doesn't convey the full meaning of the word, but for me it's stay close. Stay close to me. Now, Jesus has said that twice in that first verse. Now, in case you missed it in verse 4, in verse 5 he says, "If a person remains in me," if a person stays close to me. And then in verse 6, "If anyone does not remain in me," does not stay close to me. And in case you've dozed off, in verse 7, I'll remind you, it says, "If you remain in me." And again in verse 9, "If you remain in my love." And there are more verses, I won't keep adding them. Why does Jesus keep repeating this phrase? Why is this concept of staying close to him so important? I'll tell you why. It's exactly the same reason that my daughter kept telling me not to turn into oncoming traffic. He keeps repeating it because it's important. He loves you. He cares about you. He doesn't want to see you hurt. So he says, stay close to me. Stay close to me. Now, I'm the kind of person, when anyone tells me what to do, I know a lot of you are like this, I want to know how to do it. It's all very well to tell us to remain in me, but what do we do? How do we do it? Now, when you ask a question like that, let me tell you, always go back to the Bible. Keep reading. And if you keep reading this passage, you will discover in verse 10, Jesus tells us, he says, "If you obey my commands, you will remain in my love." He's used that term again. If you obey my commands, you will remain in my love. Oh no, obey. I thought this was going so well until I got to that word, obey. When someone tells me to do something and I've got to obey, I don't know why it is, something in me resists. You've got to be obedient, obey. So Jesus says, if you're going to stay close to me, you're going to obey. Obey my commands. Now, let me say something that is very important. Whenever Jesus asks you to obey, it is never to put you down. It's never to make life more miserable or make it more difficult. Whenever you are asked in the Bible to obey, it is always because it wants you to experience more freedom. Because Jesus wants you to know more freedom. He wants to make your life whole. He wants to make it more joyful. In fact, the next verse he goes on to say that my joy might be in you and that your joy might be full. We're being asked to obey so that we can be more joyful. We can experience more freedom. So Jesus is saying, stay close to me, stay close to me. And the way to stay close to me is to obey my commands. Now, this still doesn't answer my question, well, what do we do? What is the command that Jesus gives us? Now, I discover that in the Bible there are many, many commands. Lots and lots of them. And I go through some of them, I think, well, am I obeying that? There's a command in Exodus 20 that it says, you shall not covet your neighbour's ox. Now, I want you to know, I'm good on that one. I've never coveted my neighbour's ox or oxen. Never done it. Exodus 23. If you meet your enemy's donkey going astray, you shall bring it back to them. Now, I promise you that if I ever see your donkey walking down Granville Street, I will return it. I obey that command. I have no trouble with that one at all. And so I can go on through other commands. But again, I said, if you don't quite understand, stay with the Bible. And if you look carefully at John 15, Jesus actually tells us what command we are to obey. Verse 12, my command is this, love each other as I have loved you. That's it. If you're going to stay close to me, you will love each other as I have loved you. I had hoped for something a little easier. I find it's easy to love the people that are easy to love, but there are some people that are difficult to love, and I wished somehow that wasn't quite phrased that way, but he said it, love each other as I have loved you. Now, when we talk about love in the New Testament, we must always remember that love is not a feeling, it's an action. When God loved us, he didn't form a committee. He did not feel something. For God so loved the world, what did he do? He gave. He did something. In the Bible, when you love, you don't just feel something, you always do something. And to love is to actually do something, put it into action. So Jesus says, you're to love each other. Now, he does not quite say it that way, because you notice what he says, you're to love each other in a particular way. You're to love each other as I have loved you. Now, how does Jesus love us? Well, let me tell you, I discover when I read the Gospels that Jesus loves sacrificially. To love sacrificially is to willingly give up something that is rightfully yours and give it to someone else in order to enrich the life of someone else. I must tell you about my grandson, and I enjoy bragging about him. Every now and again, he and I will sit down together and we have a crazy conversation. I will sit down and I'll ask him he's only 8 years old, and I'll ask him some ridiculous question, and I said, tell me, what do you think about unilateral disarmament? And he will make up some crazy answer to me. And the other day I sat down beside him and I said, tell me, what's the meaning of life? And he said to me, this blew me away, he said, do you want to know the meaning of life? I said, yes, I would. What is the meaning of life? He said, the meaning of life is to find your gift, develop it, and the purpose of life is to give that gift away. I said, where did you find that? And this little 8-year-old said to me, Pablo Picasso said that. I said, where did you hear that? He read it on a shop window. But I thought, there's so much truth in that. That's sacrificial love. You willingly give up something that's rightfully yours, and you give it to someone else in order to enrich their life. Now, why do we say that? We say that because that is the very love that Jesus had for you and for me. He willingly gave up the majesty of heaven, and he became as a servant so that he could give us forgiveness, new life. Being in the very nature of God, he did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but made himself nothing, taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. That is sacrificial love, and that is how Jesus loved. Now, Jesus is saying, I want you to stay close to me. Keep staying close to me. And the way to stay close to me is you love each other the same way as I have loved you. And I've loved you with a sacrificial love. Now, it wasn't only a sacrificial love, it was a creative love. It was a love that was geared to the needs of each individual. One day, a man called Nicodemus, a very learned scholar, came to see him late at night. And Jesus listened to him. And Jesus said, Nicodemus, you must be born again. Then another time, a rich young ruler came to Jesus, asking questions about life. And Jesus said, he did not say to him, you must be born again. He said, no, you take your goods and you give them away. Jesus geared his love to the need of the individual where that person was at that particular time. People who love as Jesus loved are people who not only act sacrificially, but they are people who learn to listen and love that person at their place of need. But Jesus loved in another way. It wasn't just sacrificially, creatively, it was encouragingly. Read the Gospels. Wherever Jesus went, he was lifting people up, healing them in such a way they became more whole people. One day, a bunch of young mothers with their noisy, whining, crying children gathered around Jesus, and we assume and we get the feeling that people couldn't even hear what Jesus was saying. These kids were making so much noise, such a nuisance. And naturally, you want to tell them just to go away, just children, keep away. And what did Jesus do? This must have thrilled the hearts of those mothers. Jesus said, let those little children come to me. Let them come to me. For such is the kingdom of God. That's encouraging love. I plead with you, stay close to Jesus. Deliberately work in your life that you will stay close to him. And the way you'll stay close to him is to follow his command. And his command is that you will intentionally love one another in the same way that Jesus loved you. I've thought of people that I've come to know here at Trinity. I know many of you love just like that. And I could quote examples that speak of that very love that you've shown. And I could pick on someone and embarrass them, and then I would be in trouble. So I'm not going to pick on anyone. But I came across a story some time ago, a football story, that told of a little boy who showed that very love that Jesus gave. It was sacrificial, it was creative, it was encouraging. It's the story of Bart Starr. Some of you older people will remember Bart Starr. He was quarterback for the Green Bay Packers, and at his time was rated as one of the top quarterbacks of the American Football League. And Bart Starr and his wife had a child, a boy, and they gave him the name, a very creative name. They called him Bart Starr Jr. And they had some habits in their family which were very creative in a way. If Bart Starr Jr. did something they really appreciated, if he cleaned his room when he wasn't asked, for example, they would have on a little piece of paper, they would stick on the mirror, and on the little piece of paper it would say, "You cleaned your room without us asking. "We love you," signed Mom and Dad, and they always taped a dime to that piece of paper. And this was a custom in their home, and sometimes he would come home and he would tell them how he almost got a home run, almost, and there would soon be a little piece of paper stuck on the mirror. "We heard you almost got a home run. We're so proud of you. We love you, Mom and Dad." And there was a dime posted. He did well in his music lessons and so on. This happened frequently. These little bits of paper kept appearing on the mirror. One day, Bart Starr tells how he was quarterback for the Green Bay Packers, and they were getting very close to reaching the Super Bowl. And he knew that if they won the game that he was going to, if they won it, they were pretty sure of getting into the Super Bowl. He said he went and he played, and it was the worst game he had ever played. He fumbled the ball, he dropped it on occasions, he threw it to the receiver, and he threw it in the direction was so bad the receiver couldn't even see the ball. This is the worst game he'd ever played, and he felt so terrible. He tells how he walked off the field, and none of the other players walked with him. He noticed he was walking on his own. You see, they lost the game. And it was all because of Bart Starr and the way he had played the game. He says he was in the dressing room, no one wanted to talk to him. And then late that night, he got a cab to the airport to take the last flight back home. He said, "I've never felt so lonely and so sad. I'd let my team down. I'd let my family down. I'd let everyone down." He said, "I let myself down." And he got home late that night, and he said his wife and their son, Bart Starr Jr., were fast asleep. He said he went into his bathroom, and there taped on the mirror was a piece of paper. And it read, "Dear Dad, I watched you play television this afternoon, on television, and I thought you were the best player in the whole field. I thought you played so well. I'm so proud that you're my dad. I love you." And it was signed Bart Starr Jr., and he had taped a dime to that piece of paper. That's creative love. Loving that meets the need of the person. Loving that lifts the person up. Loving that's sacrificial. When a little boy gives up a dime, way back then. Jesus says, "Stay close to me." He keeps repeating it. And the way you'll stay close to me, you'll obey my command. And my command is this, that you love one another as I have loved you. May God give you the grace and the joy to grow a life like that. And then fruit will be born and lives will be changed. May God give you the grace. Amen. We're going to respond as we sing a hymn.